Hi there.
Hi Leah, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks. I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation from last week.
Yes, and what we did talked about last time was how we can anticipate those moments and start to recognize in the body where the tightness comes up or where their protection and the defenses set in. Another way to know that you're anticipating in the conversation and that you're already bringing that with you into the conversation is when you can anticipate how it's going to go. So I'm
Mhm.
a script where you can say, so we're really, we came for dinner. So why didn't you bring the thing? Or where's the whatever? Did you call the or that? Oh, good. Well, so and so told me something, didn't go well. Or I heard from so and so something negative. I can't make these up on the spot, but these are the kinds of things that come up sometimes from parents or the scripts, and we anticipate our response already, and we
All
can
right, so
see their response, and you can always go a few ways down the conversation. That's how you know you are in a pattern and a script that is
right. So we just want to remind people we're talking about difficult conversations between adult children and their parents.
yes.
And I love that, anticipating the script, because so often we walk into the situation that has repeated itself so many times,
Mhm.
and we're like surprised. Wow, I didn't think
Right.
that would be quite so critical, right?
It's never going to change, and sometimes we don't even bother to try. And these are the things that feel really common. And
Right. And to remind everybody, sorry, last time you were talking about possibility, that there's always a different way to communicate.
And we think that other people have to change for the situation to change. But what we're going to talk about are the things that are within your wheelhouse and your tools that you can to create shift in the conversation. You can't anticipate and control their change to your change, but you can create change, and your change will make a big difference. So we can think about that by thinking about changing an ingredient in a recipe can massively change the dish. Sometimes not so much, sometimes very much. But we see that in a lot of the things that we do. You change one piece of it, or you change one direction of energy, and the other piece changes. And often what we
Absolutely.
bring is a resistance. And that's not meaning it's not, we don't haven't needed it, it hasn't served us, and it isn't well justified. But when we can learn to modify that resistance while still keeping ourselves safe, we can allow for new possibilities. So if you see it as like
Right.
energies against each other. So what you brought up last time that I would love to explore is that loving kindness. So can
Mm.
you talk more about how one might come in and foster a sense of loving kindness and why that might create a change?
Right. So there are two aspects to that loving kindness. One is that we are, as if it's in our manual, if we had bought a car and we had a manual, we have an amazing ability to speak to people at a different level. In other words, you'll speak to your baby differently to the way you'll speak to your boss.
Right.
And, pardon?
I just said right. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So we have this wonderful ability, but we don't always use it. So when it comes to difficult conversations, say with our parents weren't just placed in the world. They've come with their baggage, with their parenting skills from their parents and grandparents. And very often when they're critical of us, they're talking from a younger place.
Mm.
And if we can remember or anticipate, mom needs that from me, because sometimes she is like a 5-year-old she didn't get that when she was 5. Is there a different way that I can respond to when I think of her as a wounded, tender 5-year-old?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the one side, I would say, of the loving kindness. Can I think about this before I walk into the house? The other thing is when I am triggered and when I do respond angrily, or I'm going to shut you out, whatever that is, to remember that I'm human and to
Mm-hmm.
bring loving kindness to even the ugly parts of myself, to the times I fall. Be forgiving, because that is being human, and that is a healthy self-esteem. And if I can do that for myself, everybody says, love yourself, love yourself. What does that mean? When we say negative words to ourselves, we're just acting from a place of shame.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just build up our self-esteem.
What I hear you saying in that loving kindness is the empathy and compassion we need to bring for the hurt that's inside our parents, that's what's acting out. We see it as we're the child, they're the parent, there's an authority structure. And as long as we're giving power to that authority structure, we're coming in as the child. But when we can start to see them as what you said, the past, the child inside them, and bring loving kindness to whatever their pain is that they still carry with them in their adult grown body as a parent, that frees us in some way to bring that kind of loving kindness. And the other thing you said is the loving kindness for ourselves, that when we feel triggered, that it's okay to give us the empathy ourselves, that empathy and compassion for the hurt that has been triggered, and as an alternative to feeling that we have to defend it. And those are brilliant suggestions and really transformative in the way we can then have our relationships with the parents. What comes up for me listening is then how do you know, how do you shift that? And I'm going to suggest that it's not something you can think yourself into. You can't say, okay, I'm going to think loving kindness. Oh man, they did it. No, loving kindness, loving kindness. I don't think that really works. So how might you suggest to somebody that they able to create this whole shift of energy so that they can imagine they're talking to talk with the tenderness you might bring to a baby or a child when you're seeing somebody who actually makes you feel unsafe, emotionally.
Right. So there are two aspects to what you said, and maybe I'll relate to the first one second about this hierarchy.
Yeah.
But you were asking, so how do you bring this tenderness?
Hmm.
And of course, it slipped my mind right now, but yes, no, it's back.
Okay.
We co-regulate each other. When you see a child in the park who's hurt and the mother holds the child, the mother's nervous system relaxes and the child's nervous system relaxes.
Yeah.
So I suggest to people to speak to someone like you, because we can read this all in a self-help book. But when we speak to someone who receives us, that is in a way reparenting us. That is the self-soothing. That is the soothing that comes in a healthy way rather than drinking or smoking or whatever other addictions we might go to. The connection. I feel you
Yeah.
feeling me.
I'm so excited by what you're saying because I think the co-regulation is really a key thing, and it's a really hard thing for people to understand. It almost could take a whole other conversation. So, but let's just talk about the idea of how you would use it here, and then let's come back to it and explore it further and explain it a little bit more. But I think here what you're saying is that co-reg. If you think about that, you're bringing an ability to someone to help co-regulate. And you can help yourself co-regulate, but also if you find someone who can help you co-regulate, find that coach, find that person who receives you, who empathizes with you, who helps you manage to regulate in a different way, then that is something you bring with you. And this is a transformative concept, I think, what you're bringing up, because it is not something we can control from our minds and our brain. And we tend to think that how we make things happen, the driver's seat is all in our heads. And what you're saying is it's actually something that has to happen between people, and that there's mind melds, like to bring in a Star Trek, or sometimes science fiction knows things that we haven't quite articulated yet, but you bring in the energy of somebody else and you, in a way, you borrow it. And I know how you feel that as a coach, but that's what I feel like I'm doing as a coach often is I'm lending someone the energy and they need to be able to be present for themselves and therefore explore the wisdom they already have.
Right.
They just needed a different container. They couldn't create
and then to take that to your parent. In other words, in anticipation, and not I need to answer back because you're going to be wrong and I'm going to be right. Because if we need to prove, if I need to prove that you're wrong and I'm right, then we're both going to lose.
That's right.
But if I can just hear your complaint, and I always say to clients, if you can just find one truth in it, there's never milk in the fridge.
Yeah.
Wow, that is annoying sometimes when there isn't milk in the fridge, right? Not, well, why didn't you go buy it?
Right.
Why, yeah, I noticed there's no milk in the fridge. Oof, that is annoying.
I could add so much and keep talking about where we're going, but I'm going to pause us here.
Fabulous.
It'll be a next conversation that we come back to.
Great, thanks.